Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear us. Thank you so much for trying out this new webinar format with us. And thank you so much for being here at our June 2026 Candidate Forum. We're really excited to kick off this election season. This is the first big event of the June 2026 Board of Ed race. So we're really happy to hear from one of the candidates in the race, from current President Phil Kim. And to give you an idea of how it's going to work, we're going to first start out with a little bit of education on what the board is, why this election is even happening. And then also, we're going to bring parents who have pre-joined or who we've pre-selected, and they're going to ask questions, and we are going to go through there. So, and all of the questions were pre-submitted by you when you RSVP'd, so we were able to pull those questions and collect the biggest themes we saw. And by the end of the call, all of you will either have a feedback form or a voting form, depending on your status with the organization. So, and we will also make it really clear for a future endorsement process how each of you can become a voting member for the November 2026 election. So I'm going to kick things off here. So if you're new to SF Parents Action, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. And in case you've been confused about this at all, we have a sister arm, SF Parent Coalition. That's our nonprofit side where we run all of our literacy and math campaigns and hold SFUSD accountable day to day. And this is SF Parents Action, which is the political arm. And we do events like this, of course, endorsement, and we even campaign for our endorsed candidates. We also have programming focused on civic and parent leadership, like the Pathways to Parent Leadership Workshop. We just finished our third cohort of the board boot camp, and we're always keeping track of what's going on with the Board of Ed. And I'll share here. These are our mission, vision, and equity values. So I'll read just one of them to save some time here, and I'll read our vision. We envision a future where San Francisco is one of the best places in the country for children and youth of all races, socioeconomic backgrounds, and abilities to grow up and get an excellent public education. So I think a big topic I've been learning about in the past 2 years is that there's a lot of confusion over what exactly the SFUSD school board do. Are they case managers? Are they the people who can come to your school and tell your teacher how to teach your kid? Not exactly. They have really specific roles that they need to be keeping track of in their position as a school board member. So they set the vision and the direction of the school district and monitor progress. You might see they have workshops every other meeting to see how things are going in the district. So that's one of their main responsibilities. They also manage the budget. So any money that's going to flow down to our kids has to be approved all the way at the top at the board level. And they also hire and fire the superintendent. So the only employee that has to listen to the Board of Ed directly is the superintendent, and they have to hold the superintendent accountable by, potentially firing them and also hiring a new one. And of course, this is one of our biggest beliefs. The school board should stay out of politics and focus on the students, and every vote should reflect an interest in a student's future. Also, going off of that point, they should really be focused on governance, not micromanagement. So they don't go into schools every day and tell principals what to do, tell teachers what to do. They manage from the very top through the superintendent. And of course, their decisions shape the stability and the leadership. We got a new superintendent last year, and we know how that went for our kids. And also, they have to keep that leader accountable. And then, of course, when the governance is strong and when the board is really focused on their role, districts can better improve student outcomes, also navigate budget constraints. We've seen some positive developments with that, and I know Meredith will touch on that in a little bit. And they also maintain public trust. And why does the SFUSD school board matter? Well, it matters because they are the leaders in what happens with our kids' schooling every single day. And we know that SFUSD schools don't have equitable outcomes for kids. And we have a long way to go if we want to support all 50,000 kids in San Francisco. And also, our schools need strong leaders, and they need to be focusing on our students and the quality of our schools, not just sound bites and ideologies that may attract other people in San Francisco that aren't necessarily parents, caregivers, and teachers. And there's also a lot of room for improvement. So that's kind of why we're here and why we have such clear focus on the board. And I'm going to pass it over to Meredith.
Thank you, Giovanna, and thanks everyone for being here tonight. I'll talk a little bit about recent history and challenges before I talk about the specific election that we're looking at in June, and the candidates who are running. So this is the context, this recent history and challenges of facing our school district. This is the context that candidates are stepping into and the environment that their governance decisions will shape. The district is facing ongoing budget instability and the possibility of major cuts while remaining under partial state oversight. Leadership turnover over the last few years has disrupted continuity and strained trust across school and San Francisco communities. So just looking back, there's some positive too, right? So looking back, thinking about where we were 5 years ago when this organization started, 2020, 2021, 2022, there was a lot of controversy. Our district could not get out of, the negative headlines, national, international news, not for the right reasons. But we saw a shift in 2022, post school board recall. We saw the district get really focused on a strong vision for our students. Commissioner Jenny Lamb at that time stewarded this vision, values, goals, and guardrails set of goals for our students around literacy, math, and career and college readiness. And that's still the vision that guides our district and our school board today, and that the current superintendent is following several years later. Um, but we had a structural deficit that was still growing at the time. We were still plugging our budget deficit gaps with one-time funds that were supposed to be there to support students during the pandemic. And instead, we were just plugging gaps, and our budget deficit was growing. And so we saw kind of a combination over the last few years of positive and negative for the school district, where the school board was getting more focused, and is much more focused than it was 5 years ago on kids and learning, which is great. The district in 2023-24 approved an evidence-backed literacy program that SF parents and many of the parents in our network who were running that campaign were advocating for. But the budget woes continued. So we saw the superintendent at that time starting to consider school closures. The following year, 24-25, we saw that closure plan fail. That was last year. But our budget sort of continued to worsen, and we slipped one step further closer to negative, or closer to state takeover into negative certification with the State Department of Education for budget rating. And that's when they can begin to take control over your budget. So they couldn't make cuts themselves or close schools themselves, but the state could prevent or veto spending decisions like raises. Fortunately, before that negative certification, we were able to pass the historic and much overdue raises for our teachers, which SF parents supported. This year, we saw the district bring in a new math program, a new evidence-based math program for K through 8, and the algebra pilot continues and is supposedly going to be across all middle schools by next school year. We'll keep you posted on that. And we, this year, just a few weeks ago, actually heard from the superintendent the announcement around an improved budget rating from the state. This is great, but still much more work to be done, and we know that cuts continue. So we just wanted to give everyone this context. We know that some people here are very familiar with what's going on with our district, and some of you are newer to what's going on and not as focused on the day-to-day of what's going on with the school district. So I wanted to give a little bit of context there about what the candidates are stepping into. Okay. So why is this forum happening tonight? Elections for the school board are usually in November. And in fact, this year we have a November school board election and 3 seats are up, including the seat that some folks are running for in June. So what happened, it's kind of unusual, but the former school board president, Laney Matomedy, stepped down in 2024. And when that happens, there's an appointed commissioner put in place when someone steps down from the school board. And then if there's a special election, then for other reasons, then that candidate or that commissioner has to run to hold their seat. And so Phil Kim was appointed at that time, and now he has to run to hold his seat for just 6 more months. So just to finish his term, he has to run and win to finish out the 6 months of his current term. And then this seat is also open again in November. So we have two school board elections this year in June and November. And 3 seats will be up in November, including that same seat again. A little bit more about kind of what it takes to win and why we care about having an endorsement process. It is a lot of work to run an endorsement process, especially one as robust as we run. Those of you who are voters in our process and who are engaged with creating the process, we have parents create it from scratch, especially for the larger elections. We have parents beginning in March who will start to design what the next process looks like, and parents are developing the questions that we ask candidates and are participating tonight, as you'll see in a bit. And we thank the parent leaders who are here tonight who will be asking the questions of candidate Phil Kim. But just a little bit more about this election, because endorsements are important. Here we go. So we've got about 531 registered voters in San Francisco the last time we checked. And at a smaller election like this one, there's much smaller percentage of voters who actually turn out. So maybe about 200,000. Then you get to the Board of Education, which is considered a down ballot race. That means fewer voters make it all the way down. Some voters just skip the school board and don't vote for it at all, which I know it's shocking, right? Why wouldn't you vote for the school board? No, everyone should vote for the school board. Every vote matters. A school board candidate who wants to win the race will need to develop a path to convince about 100,000 voters. That's still a lot of votes. It's a citywide election as opposed to a district election like your supervisor, which is basically like our city council in San Francisco, which is just your neighborhood or a few neighborhoods that are adjacent to each other. So you need fewer votes for those elections. But a school board candidate is citywide. So they need to convince 100,000 voters, which is why endorsements matter and why we have an endorsement process. Okay, so in addition to us, there's other endorsements that really carry weight and turn votes. So you can't just really get one endorsement. You need a bunch of them to get that many votes. You can tell your friends and email your friends and have your friends tell their friends, but that's still probably not going to be enough votes. So that's why for this kind of election, you must be able to convince these endorsing groups that you are the best candidate. So they tell all of their networks. For example, we have about 10,000 parents, teachers, and community members who receive our newsletter, right? So it's powerful when groups tell their members, their network, who they think are the best candidates for whatever office they are endorsing for. And for us, it's just for school board. Okay. All right, so with that, this special small election in June is very interesting. We really have two candidates who have launched campaigns for June. We have a third candidate here who we'll talk about a little bit as well. And then there are a couple of others who filed. In fact, I think I saw one of them is in the webinar room tonight watching, Michael Turan. But I believe he's not running for June and that he's running for November. So we'll mostly focus on tonight on the candidate and current president, Phil Kim, who you'll be hearing from shortly during our interview process with President Phil Kim and candidate. We do not have here tonight Brandy Markman. We'll talk about her and her candidacy a little bit. And then Raquel Miller, who we'll also share a little bit about, but she's not yet launched a campaign. So she's not entered our endorsement process as she's not yet launched a campaign. But I'll get back to her in a second. So Phil Kim, I'll just cover briefly since we're spending most of the conversation with him tonight. He's had a career focus on equity and excellence in education. Kim is a former teacher. He's the former STEM director at KIPP, and he's the current SFUSD Board of Education president. Okay, Brandy Markman, another candidate who has launched her campaign. She's the former head of the SF Bernie Kratz, which brings a decent sized following her way. She's a public school mom and regularly attends and comments at school board meetings. Some of the stances, again, so she is not participating tonight, but we do know a lot about this candidate, given that she is very vocal at school board meetings and other city meetings, and so we do know a lot about her stances. And so some of those are back in 2020, 2021, when we had some of the longest school closures, actually the longest school closures of any major city across the country, and families were um, fighting hard to get kids back into school when the public health department said it was okay. But she was opposing the safe reopening and following public health guidance and staunchly supporting the school renaming process that many others were frustrated by why were we renaming Lincoln High School while kids couldn't even be in the high school? Markman opposed the return of eighth grade algebra to middle school, and also staunchly opposed the school board recall of 2021-22, and was one of Allison Collins' biggest supporters. Collins was a school board commissioner, if you weren't paying attention back then, who was notoriously suing the school district and her colleagues on the school board for $90 million after making anti-Asian tweets and being asked to step down from her board position. This candidate, Markman, from both her public comments at the school board and city meetings and her online Twitter presence, many know of her as a conspiracy theorist who has attacked education advocates, including us, as school privatizers and right wing. And so it's not surprising to us that she declined to participate in our parent endorsement process and is not here with us tonight. But that is what we know about her, and are happy to share anything else that you'd like to know about her if you reach out. And that's all we know about Markman. So Raquel Miller, we wanted to share, we've done some research, and we've been able to reach out to her and heard back from her a bit, but she let us know that she's not yet ready to launch her campaign process. And we believe that we're hoping to see her launch a campaign in time for the November school board election, because she does sound like an interesting candidate, and like she could be a strong school board candidate. She's a public school mom and SFUSD alumni. She's a boxer for Team USA, which means a big following. And she's a nonprofit co-founder. She has a nonprofit called Ladies in Power that mentors young women. And it's local, it's focused on mentoring young women in the Bay Area. So she sounds pretty awesome, and we hope to meet her, and we hope she launches a campaign in time to run for November 2026. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else I was going to share about her. I don't think so. And then, as we said, there's a couple of other folks who have filed with the Department of Elections, but we don't believe they are launching campaigns. We know that Michael's not campaigning for June, and we don't believe Del Medina is launching a campaign for June either, maybe for November. So those are the candidates. And now we have President Phil Kim, candidate for June election, with us tonight. And so we're going to move into our parent-led questioning process with him. And I think we have parent leaders who are going to join us in. Okay, sorry. I am asking the first question. Let's first invite candidate and current president Phil Kim to the stage. Oh, I see you.
Hi.
Hello, hello. Thank you for
Hello,
joining us
hello.
tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I have the pleasure of asking our first question tonight during our candidate interview. You will have President Kim, candidate Kim, you'll have 3 minutes to answer this introductory question as well as the subsequent questions during the forum tonight. So, can you please tell the audience, our crowd here tonight, by the way, we have 90 of you in the room. Can you tell us what kind of specific background and experience that you add to the school board and why you're a strong candidate for San Francisco's kids?
Awesome. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Giovanna. And hello, it's really fantastic to be here today. And thank you for the opportunity to share a bit more about myself and to hear from you all. My journey began in the classroom teaching seventh grade science, and I loved it. I did my best to channel some Bill Nye the Science Guy energy, so I kind of became that teacher who blew things up and set things on fire and had a ton of classroom pets. And since then, I've had the deep privilege to serve in nearly every level of a K through 12 public education system across 22 different states as a teacher, administrator in instruction and operations, most recently with the SFUSD School District and the Office of Superintendent, and now at the governance level. And I do want to take a moment to share a little bit about my background, as I do feel like that informs a little bit of how I show up as a leader. My parents immigrated here from South Korea. They had two failed small businesses and really struggled to make ends meet. And while I really did live a life full of family and friends, we also experienced a lot of loss and fear. And I often turned to school as my refuge and opportunity. So when it came time to look for a life beyond high school, I chose to go to college and really struggled. And here's the reality, is that I found my way through college and through life, frankly, because of the educators in my life who pushed and pulled me through when times were really tough and showed me what was possible, both financially and personally. And as a Pell Grant recipient who had to pay my own way through college and still graduated with crippling debt, I then chose to become a teacher and was just a wildly different career path than the doctor my mom wanted me to be. So I'm here today really proud, deeply humbled, and incredibly focused. I'm proud of our city and proud of our district for making tangible steps in the right direction to right our fiscal and operational ship. I'm really humbled at the sheer amount of work that we have ahead of us and the challenges that we still feel every day, that you all probably feel every day. And I'm incredibly focused on the work that we have to do still ahead of us to do right by our kids. And we have some tough times ahead, but I have no doubt that together we can get through this. It doesn't make our challenge decisions any easier, but I am really hopeful for what we can build together as we adjust course. And so I just want to thank you again for your consideration. I look forward to engaging in the process and genuinely thank you for your time, your leadership, and your power building to hold us accountable to our work. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we are going to our first parent question from Yvette Edwards. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Phil. I'm Yvette Bies Edwards. I'm an SFUSD parent, also a co-founder of SF Parent Action. You've spent much of your career working in and around charter schools and other innovative school models. From that experience, what lessons, both cautionary and positive, do you think are most relevant for SFUSD's public schools today? And what are the limitations or pitfalls SFUSD should be careful not to replicate?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I spent 11 years working in our public education system, first in the classroom and then as a coach leader, systems wide, and a lot of that time with KIP. And I will say this. When we think about education and education systems, when we think about the services and impact that we have on youth and families, regardless if it's a charter system, a parochial school down the street, or SFUSD's public education system, these are folks who are trying to do right by our kids, and we should learn from each other in every possible way. We have good work that we are doing in SFUSD. And in fact, we should talk more about it and perhaps even share that with our neighbors. And we have a lot to learn as well as a district on what's working and not working. in classrooms and beyond. And what I'm most interested in understanding is what is it that we can learn from each other to create the right conditions for our kids. And I have been incredibly privileged to work in school systems um, where we can really come together and understand what does it mean to coach effectively? What does it mean to implement curriculum effectively? What does it mean for us to set high expectations for our students and build the right scaffolds for them to get there? And it's that kind of reflection and work that I lean on all the time. And I think about when I think about our system as SFUSD, and I'm really committed to that. I'll just say right off the bat, our San Francisco is a really diverse place. We don't have the interest in charter schools here that we see in other cities. We just don't. People are incredibly invested in SFUSD and ensuring the success of our public school system here. And we should be really proud of that. And we've invested quite literally in the millions of dollars in the success of our kids in SFUSD. I'm incredibly focused on that, making sure that we create the best possible system. I am not trying to throw any sort of shade or opinion on any parent who chooses what's right for their kids, right? What we should be doing is building a system where every parent in this city can look to us as the choice top example of what it means to serve kids well. And that is how we retain our families, attract new ones, and build a system that works for all.
Thank you. I believe there's another parent who has the next question ready to go.
Thanks, Yvette. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Yvette. Thanks, Phil. Mehdi, I think it's your turn.
I can't turn on my video now. I don't know why. I don't know, Giovanni, if you want to help with that. Okay, great. Works now. Hi, thank you for being here. I'm Mahdi Rahimi. I am an SFUSD parent at Dolores Huerta. I serve on as a Parent Leadership Council. My question is, SFUSD consistently ranks as one of the highest funded large urban districts in California on a per pupil basis. Given our level of funding, why is the district still struggling with balancing its budget? And then the second part of the question is that how do you envision to increase the funding to our school district apart from the sources from the state, from local sources through negotiations with the mayor and board of supervisors?
Yeah. So I heard two questions in there. One is what gives? Why are we still struggling with our money? And the second around what do we need to do to kind of right our ship here and build capacity for ourselves? So I'll speak to the first one around, what brought us here today. Part of the challenge that we're in is, we and I just want to say from the onset, we are an incredibly well-resourced district because we believe kids in our schools deserve more. That is partly why our city has given us so much, and voters have consistently affirmed that funding for our public schools. It is a good thing, right? We should be invested in our schools and our kids, and we should have a higher expectation for what it means to deliver a wonderful public education, right? We shouldn't be ashamed of that, and we should be really proud of the work that our city has done to build a really amazing network of support, both from individual capacities to our CBO partners to funding. That being said, we need to make more. We needed to have made the tough decisions all along to adjust course as we needed, as we went. Part of the acuteness that we're feeling right now is because we've let ourselves pile up in the kind of expenses that we have without a plan for funding all of it. And that's partly the challenge that we're in right now. We are surviving on credit card debt, right? And this goes back to something that Meredith mentioned before, or maybe it was Giovanna. We need to do better at understanding what it means to have one-time dollars going to one-time expenses and having recurring unrestricted general fund dollars go to the most important thing, which is teaching and learning for our kids, right? And that level of discipline is something that I do think this board has been incredibly focused on, and a message that we've received loud and clear from CDE around the work that we have to do, right? That means putting systems in the right place. That includes payroll and being able to pay our teachers on time and not wasting our money, in addition to finding ways to more thoroughly partner. The city already funds us incredibly well. We absolutely do need to ask the state to continue to fund and fund more our public education system. And we need to make sure that we are spending our dollars wisely. All of that is real.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. Next, we have Roberto.
Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Roberto Guzman Rivera, an SFUSD parent at Guadalupe Elementary and a graduate of SF Parents Coalition's Read to Lead program. And this is my question. As a board president during a period of significant challenges for SFUSD, how do you assess your effectiveness today? What have you learned about governing during times of instability and fiscal stress? And looking back, what is one decision you are proud of and one you will approach differently to better serve students, families, educators, and school communities?
Yeah. Thank you for that question and good to see you. Wow, it's such a great question, especially at a time in January. We're reflecting back on last year and looking to the future. Um, I will say I deeply respect this board and frankly anyone who wants to serve in this capacity, both generally as a commissioner or even in leadership. It is tough. You have a group of individuals who are all volunteers who are trying to do their best. And so I have deep, deep respect for all our commissioners, both current and past, and anyone in the future who wants to join in this work. It is tough, right? Because for any time that we have an opinion, of which there could be 7 different opinions on something, it is the superintendent's job to take that information and do something with it, right? And we disagree all the time, right? We disagree all the time on things. And we mess up too, and we should own that. I think the thing that we cannot do is avoid the challenges that we have in front of us to kick the can down the road and not make decisions because it's tough. And as a board, it is incumbent upon us to come together and do right by our kids by holding expectations for both ourselves and the superintendent in that. But let's be clear, she doesn't have to listen to any one person, including the board president. This is the work of what it means to build a coalition on a board where we have a majority that can speak, right? And ideally, all together as a body to speak, right? When I think upon this past year, I think the thing that I'm really proud of is, we have built a really strong relationship with the state and with our partners in making a clear message that we are doing what it takes to put in the right systems to kind of course correct here. And that's anything from our, payroll system and the things that we have there, but also in continuity of leadership and making sure that we have the right people in the right place to deliver for our students and families. And so I am really proud of the fact that the board has come together to really stay focused on and disciplined in what it means to progress monitor and hold the district and superintendent accountable through the mechanisms that we have in our good governance practices. We're also not perfect, right? And that's why I established an ad hoc on progress monitoring to reflect on the practices that we have in our progress monitoring practices and ask ourselves, what are we missing here and where do we need to improve? In the same way that we established an ad hoc on public engagement, which actually our first meeting is tomorrow, if you all are interested in coming, to ask ourselves the critical question of, the district has always struggled and the board has struggled to engage the public consistently and set baseline expectations for commissioners around engaging the public. So what are those? And what do we need to do? And those are the kind of systems cleanup that we've been focused on this past year that we need to continue to operationalize moving forward in 2026 and beyond.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Roberto. Next, we have Gerald.
Great. Hi. I'm Hi, President Kim. We've met and talked a bit. I'm a SFUSD parent also. I guess, well, most of us are. Um, my question for you, you've run for this position a couple of times before, and you did not win. What did you learn from that? What are you going to do differently, or what's different about things this time?
That's a great question as well. Correct. So I ran back in 2016 and in 2018. And when I ran in 2016, uh, there wasn't an educator on our board at that time. I was just outside the classroom and went to a board meeting and was like, who are these people? And I literally Google searched them. As if parents didn't exist, I think Parent Pack was the biggest thing at the time, with Parents for Public Schools and other people. Like the landscape was just totally different then. We didn't have the kind of coalition building and the energy around schools that, frankly, the pandemic brought, right? And that power has shifted a lot in recent years. Um, when I ran, they were talking about JROTC and the kind of paint that goes on walls of schools. Like it was just a very student outcomes were not a thing that folks were talking about all the time. Progress monitoring meetings didn't happen. Like when not what 10 years ago, 9 years ago, when I pulled papers to run. Oh my gosh, it's been 10 years since I pulled papers to run. Anyway, when I first ran, I can't share enough, and I'm sure many of you, some of you on this call, remember it's just night and day from where we were then to now, right? Um, and so that journey is not lost on me on how much I have grown during that time and how much this district and this city has grown in that time to focus on kids and families. It's again something I think we should be proud of that trajectory, and we have a lot more work to do. Um, but the thing that I've learned in that, and I will just be honest, after my second time that I lost, I hung my hat up for elected leadership and I turned my attention to schools, to serving the district, to working internally. That is what I did up through 20 for KIP for so many years. And that's what drew me to work on staff for SFUSD. I was not expecting to be appointed onto this position in this body. I was working, and my partner will constantly remind me, I was on staff in SFUSD with the job. And the choice to move from that position to serve in a governance capacity was one, of course, that I was always thinking about. But because I do believe it's an important position and an important body. Um, but a lot of that coalition building and the relationships built over time is, I think, what's prepared me so much to step into this role. It's the constantly being engaged with the education community and advocates, many of you who are on this call. And we've grown deeply throughout that time. And I think that's come to help in our time today, where I'm serving as president and able to bring people together and have honest conversations about the work ahead of us.
Well, thank you, President Kim.
Thanks, Gerald. Go ahead, Brandy.
Hi, President Kim. I'm Brandy Lawless. I'm a parent of a student in SFUSD at Sheridan, and I'm a recent graduate of SF Parent Action's Board of Education Bootcamp, and I'm a professor at USF. My question is two parts. What are one or two things you'd like to see changed at SFUSD's middle and high schools that would have a positive impact on our students' academic or extracurricular experiences? And then, because I am a professor and seeing those students come to USF underprepared, what's one thing SFUSD could do to improve not just graduation rates, but our career and college readiness rates?
Thank you, Lana, for the questions in the chat. It's very helpful for me. Um, so, things, I have a specific answer for high school, and I'll come to that in just a moment. Yeah, I have a teaching background, so the place where my mind goes to immediately is our multi-tiered system of support and what it means to actually have a strong and robust tier one instructional level and interventions after that, right? We don't build master schedules in SFUSD. We don't, well, I take that back. We need to be clear about what exactly is the resource that's going into operationalizing an effective district-wide multi-tiered system of supports or similar, right? So that we can understand and monitor what it means to have robust tier one instruction, what it means to serve students at the tier two level, and for the students who are furthest to reach and farthest from opportunity, what does it mean to actually build systems and routines, systems and structures that actually serve them well, right? We have MTSS in our schools and in our system, but in a recent school visit I had to, was it Presidio Middle School, and I was looking at their master schedule and asking, well, when does intervention take place? They were like, we don't have dedicated time for intervention. And to me, it is a missed opportunity for us to really actually invest in a system that we know research-based works, right? For high school, and that's across all grades, but for high school in particular, what I would say is I have been insistent in asking for a comprehensive strategy around our course availability and our curricular offerings at the high school level, because it is something that I, one, know that it is systemically hard to do. School systems at the high school level are just harder to put together. Master schedules are more complex. Course offerings are much greater, all that work. And two, for us to actually take stock of what exactly is the kind of instructional strategy in the classroom that we're looking at. We talk a lot about kind of factors that lead to students at risk. We talk a lot about CTE support, and all of that is really strong and solid. But I want to be able to talk about instructional strategies at the high school level in the same way we talk about instructional strategies in the classroom at the K-8 level. And that's just something I'm really interested in and deeply invested in.
Thank you.
I think next is Laura, and we might have time for an additional question after Laura. Great job in answering the questions succinctly, Phil. Laura, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Meredith. Hi, President Kim. I'm Laura Kennedy, an SFUSD parent to a student at Gikwo Elementary, where I serve on the school site council. And like Brandy, I'm also a graduate of SF Parent Action's Board of Education Bootcamp program. So this is a two-part question about learning and the growth from that learning. If SFUSD moves forward with school closures or consolidations, what lessons should the Board of Education take away from the failed RAI process and the academy school closure? And as a board member, what would you want to see done differently next time and how those decisions are designed and overseen?
Thank you for that question. And so I'll take my time in answering this one a little bit. So I want to say in October, the board moved forward with two major decisions that directed the superintendent to build comprehensive plans around. One was around school reorganization, which includes not just the option of closures, mergers, and co-locations, but also what does it mean to meaningfully support programs across our city and utilize the resources that we have to the best of our ability. And the second was to bring back forward a comprehensive plan for enrollment and our enrollment policy, which we have one in the books around our zone-based policy that we have, but we've officially asked the superintendent to develop plans to actually begin implementing elements of that policy and what that looks like. It was a unanimous 7-0 from the board to begin authorizing the superintendent to develop plans around that. And I want to say very clearly here, I mean, as someone who was on staff in the district when RAI was taking place, I just want to say directly, right? Like, there's a lot of lessons that we learned from that process, that I've learned from that process. And there are better ways to do it than with the way we did it. And we should learn from that practice and that experience and improve upon it, right? I think the questions that we were asking were the right questions, but we absolutely need to think through deeply what it means to meaningfully partner with our school communities such that any solution that the superintendent brings forward is not a surprise, right? The conditions around our schools have not changed. Enrollment is still declining. We have over 14,000 empty seats across our city. And those are realities that we need to continue to grapple with, right? Alongside the questions that we continue to ask around what does it mean to stabilize enrollment? What does it mean to leverage our spaces for public good and for our kids? And what does it mean to make decisions around all of this that center not just our vision, values, goals, and guardrails, but center the actual learning experience of our students, such that we are using every single penny and every single resource at our disposal in service of improving student outcomes for kids. Those are the kind of questions that we are asking. That's the kind of authorization we've given to the superintendent to produce a plan that actually demonstrates how we're going to get to improved student outcomes given the limited resources that we have. That does not mean, and I will say this continuously, it does not mean that we're going to see closures left and right? We have to ask ourselves whether the district even has the capacity to do what we have in front of us well, right? And that is so important in our conversations that we have ahead of us. And we just can't ignore the fact that our resources are getting spread thin, right? And so what does that mean then in terms of the kind of strategic work that the superintendent is doing around school reorganization, right? So in many ways, part of the expectation, I think, of the board is to honor our guardrails around community engagement, around resource allocation, and which means that we need to adequately engage the public and meaningfully engage our school communities so that we come to a solution together. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that the superintendent will produce plans for that. We look forward to seeing those plans and bringing them to the public, and we should have thoughtful conversation about all of that and what that means for us moving forward. I think the ultimate goal here and the takeaway that I want to just reiterate is, the board continues to stay incredibly focused on our vision, values, goals, and guardrails, third grade reading, eighth grade math, college and career readiness. The constant question we will ask is, tell us how the budget that you put in front of us, the plans that you put in front of us, demonstrate that you have the tools, resources, people, and plans to get us there.
Thank you, President Kim.
Thanks,
course.
Laura. All right, I've got one last question for you. So we have some of the worst equity gaps. We have one of the worst equity gaps in the state of California, despite being progressive San Francisco. Our low-income Black and Latino kids, compared to their peers statewide, are at the bottom decile in math and reading scores at SFUSD. This is unacceptable, and yet it continues, and we're not seeing significant progress in closing that gap. We are seeing, the new literacy program, the new math program, but there's a lot of policy changes that we can do and change to make faster progress towards closing that gap. One policy and systems change is working towards more integrated schools. We have some of the most segregated schools in San Francisco. So let me just check back the question. So yes, students are more segregated by race than they have been at any time since desegregation efforts began in the 1970s. The district has repeatedly delayed implementation of a promised zone-based enrollment system to reduce that segregation. So as a school board member, would you push to implement the system? And if not, what would you do to reduce racial segregation in our schools?
So yes, just to reiterate my previous response, the board unanimously directed the superintendent at an October board meeting to proceed with building plans for school reorganization and enrollment. Because those two things are incredibly tied together, right? How families and students come into the district is impacted by obviously the schools and programs and offerings that we have at the district. And so yes, the district, or the board rather, has unanimously asked the superintendent to proceed with planning for that. We don't know, and we have not seen any of those plans yet in terms of what it takes to operationalize all of it, but the direction has been given. That being said, to the first half of your question, yeah, this is the part that I get really energized by is conversations around what it means to close our opportunity gaps in San Francisco. And I just want to say a few things to that. One, you know, while our schools are incredibly foundational, both like spaces for our communities, unfortunately, our schools alone cannot solve the very real gaps that we have in our social services, housing instability, concerns around immigration, all of that work that is happening all across this country and the city. We will do our part to defend our kids and our families. And like the gaps that we see in our system are a reflection of the gaps that we see in society. And that is heartbreaking and challenging, right, as a system to solve. And we as a city need to come together and ask the questions of what does it take to get the right resources to the right folks so that they can continue to thrive here. Because if they're not coming to school ready to learn because they haven't had breakfast, because they've been working all night, or for taking care of siblings, that is not going to help us at all in achieving our goals. That being said, the question becomes, what are the in-school factors that we know have an impact on kids, right? Especially the kids that are furthest from opportunity as well. And that's a very good question. And to that, I would say, one, we need to make sure kids are ready to learn, right? Are they in school? That requires them to come to school. And anything from mental health supports to psychological safety to having a trusted adult and a caring friend in a school system for young people, we know matters in learning outcomes for kids. The second is curriculum, right? We know that curriculum and instructional materials if they have shared high quality instructional materials, it has multiplying effects on our ability to serve kids well, right? We're talking about shared learning, shared curriculum, and opportunities for kids to access rigorous instructional materials every day in class. And the third is teacher support. Every good teacher needs a good coach, right? And so, as someone who's worked on the professional learning side of the house and instructional side of the house in that area, we need to make sure that our teachers have the support that they need, that our coaches are coached and supported so that they can in turn coach and support teachers, that they're doing that around high quality instruction and materials in classrooms where students are ready to learn, right? So like we can see the kind of system here internally of what are the things that are at our disposal to make sure that we create the best possible learning environments. And those are the kind of things that I focus on as an educator, as a former teacher. The things that are top of mind for me as a system are precisely those three things that I think a lot about.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Giovanna, do we want to do one last question? Can we fit one in?
I think we can fit a short one in. You have one.
Do you have one ready, or do you want to grab one from chat?
Let's see. Looking at the questions in chat. Let's see, we have the question from Stephanie Meredith.
Sure. Okay. So, you talked about President Kim, you talked earlier about MTSS. So, the question is around inconsistency of implementation, and can or should the board be involved at all in requiring? I don't actually don't totally understand the question. Talk about the inconsistency of MTSS implementation. If it's very important, how do we get it to be more consistent?
Yeah. Stephanie, if I'm following the spirit of your question, I think what I'm also hearing is just what can the board do to actually require implementation of anything, really, curriculum, MTSS, what have you, right? I really appreciated Giovanna's kind of introduction here, talking about the role of the board versus the role of the superintendent. And maybe I'll use this opportunity to share a little bit about my kind of like mental model worldview around all of this, right? Um, we're a governance board dedicated to a student outcomes focused governance model that very clearly lays out what is within the purview and responsible functioning of a board relative to a superintendent that we hire who leads the day-to-day operations of the district, right? We set the vision and values. Those vision and values operationalize in the form of goals and guardrails. Goals being things that we're monitoring and looking towards to accomplish, and guardrails that are expectations that the superintendent should not violate, right? But the way that our governance model works says that everything else is up to the superintendent to implement, right? And for those of you who maybe like volunteered in nonprofit boards or what have you, you may also empathize with the fact of like what it means for a board to overstep and micromanage and start to direct staff versus empowering the superintendent to lead and make choices on behalf of the system, right? This is why we can't act unless we have a majority of the board and why the board typically moves as a body, right? Because there's 7 different perspectives. Let's just be really clear. We don't have 8 superintendents. We have 1, right? And that balance there is really hard to navigate, but it's an important boundary that we have, right? If the superintendent does deliver, we don't do the job for her, right? We need to support her, find resources for her, coach her, et cetera, right? And when the superintendent's thriving, we celebrate that, right? So the way that we hold the superintendent accountable is through our monitoring meetings, right? Which we've dedicated half our meetings to, which is asking this question of, do you have the plans and the evidence that show that you can meet our goals and guardrails, right? And if you have that, then we should be continuously supporting and affirming in our monitoring meetings. And if they're not able to articulate that, then it's up to us to ask the tough questions and have the high expectations to see those plans and bring those forward, right? And so that to me is, the role of board work being distinct from the role of staff and superintendent work is the kind of work that we want to focus on and stay really true to, because what we don't want to do is become the board that then micromanages and bulldozes. And we have seen what happens when that kind of board takes place and that kind of behavior comes through. And we don't want to go into that world. We want to set high expectations, hold the superintendent accountable to it, and use the tools at our disposal to make sure that we're consistently moving the needle for our kids.
Thank you, President Kim, for your time tonight. We are going to transition to Giovanna wrapping up on our end in a moment, but we will let you go. So we really appreciate it. And thank you to the parent leaders who asked such strong questions to President and candidate Kim. We wish you good luck in your race, and you will hear from SF Parents Action soon about our endorsement decisions after we have run our full process. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to learning more. Thanks so much.
Thank you again to all the parent leaders who joined, all the parents, families, community members, teachers who also joined us online. It's really, really a good way to start the year, really exciting. And like Meredith said, stay tuned for our endorsement, for our endorsement announcement by early February. And everyone will be getting an email in their inbox shortly. If you're an endorsing member, you'll get the link to the now functioning endorsement form. And to the rest of you, if you attended this event and you're not a voting member, we'd still love to hear your thoughts on how the event went. And also if you have any additional thoughts about the candidate. And we will also be hosting a lot of great events this year, like always. So stay tuned, pay close attention to our newsletter. And if there's anything else, maybe additional questions you had, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to chat with any of you at every time. And also, I'm seeing question in the chat. At this point in time, we decided on our voting members based on who has been participating in SF Parents in the past. But for our November 2026 election, we will make it really clear on how to become a voting member for the full endorsement, of course. And yeah, I think that's all for tonight. Really appreciate you all being here late on a Wednesday night. And I hope everyone learned something tonight and also has a good night after this. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much, everyone.